They're getting ready to jump back into the equities market, and they're looking to do a preference share, a redeemable preference share in US dollars. Tell us about that upcoming offer.
So for those who don't know, PBS last came to the JSE back in September 2022, and back then they raised about, I think it was 18 million US dollars for their preference share raise, and then they subsequently acquired Infotrans Group, which is based out of Suriname, in early 2023. So the latest offer they're putting forward is to do another preference share raise. This one, though, is 40 million preference shares at 8.25%. Please note, PBS doesn't have to issue all of those preference shares either. So when they had gotten their approval in February 2022, they only issued a smaller fraction of what they were approved for. So we don't know the specifics as to what the internet fundraise is going to be used for, but we can likely infer from the recent developments. So right now, Xerox Corporation, yes, Xerox still exists. It's not a fantasy of appearance. It's still a company that actually exists today. They've been undergoing an entire transformation of their business. So they've been looking to try and rejig the business, reduce costs, see how they can, bring back up operating profit, bring back return to shareholders. So what they've been doing is that they've been actually, reducing their direct positions in certain countries. So what do you mean by that? So their Argentina and Chile business was sold to Grupo DACO back in March. And the way it's going to work is that they would sell operation, and this entity would still receive Xerox products. Those subsidiaries will still be the exclusive Xerox providers, and they would have a more capital light approach in the sense that they provide more of the services and other products, but not have to take on the heavy lifting of being indirect operation in some of these markets. So in the case of PBS, they're actually going to be acquiring Ecuador and Peru, the Xerox Ecuador and Peru businesses, and that's supposed to be closed by the end of this quarter, which would be Q2, which ends on June 30. So that was dependent and is still dependent on the Ecuador Competition Authority. But basically, let's get back to what is a preference share and how it usually works. So preference share is just above ordinary shares on the capital structure. And the way most companies issue preferences on the JSE is as a way of a semi-hybrid way of debt. So what do I mean by that? So PBS, for example, when they listed on JSE back in August 2018, they actually had the time had raised $2.5 billion J worth of preference shares at 9.75%. What does that mean? So PBS would have said over 6 years, we will, pay interest on these preference shares, or in this case, your preference share dividends every half year. Their maturity is coming up in July 2024. So what that means is PBS will pay back the principal plus any remaining dividends to be paid out to the preference shareholders at that point in time. So it's not fully debt, meaning it's going to be classified on the high level of the capital structure, but it does give some level of flexibility for the companies of how they manage it and ratios and so forth. How does it work for investors? So if you owned the 9.75% preference share, for example, that preference share was priced at 100 Jamaican dollars as its par/issue price. So 9.75% times $100 equates to 9.75 as the dividend per year, which is 4.375 split each half year, basically. And the way persons like me tend to money on pref shares is that we buy below the issue price, that's maturity price, and we sell it back above that price as well. So, for example, buy at 90 And if the opportunity comes, sell at 119, 120, whoever is willing to buy from you.
Okay, sorry. So for those who don't know, David, what does PBS actually do?
So think of them as your intermediary toolman, the kind of company that works in the background to keep things running. So they have the printing business, which is like traditional HP and other services, still a big part of their general business. So for like persons who work in an office, some of these printers that are in the offices are serviced by PBS's employees, and they're across the entire region, and they're actually the largest US distributor in the Western Hemisphere. So that's with the printing business, right? And then they also provide distribution and maintenance services on other complementary products. But in complementary products, so if you've actually gone to a NTB, a Sagicor, First Caribbean ATM, done a withdrawal or any transaction, and look at the back of the receipt, you're going to see PBS on it. I kid you not. So they're working on maintenance of the ATMs. Then when it comes on to other markets like in, let us say, El Salvador or Costa Rica, where the customs agents, are working with X-rays and other products, they're working in that space. I believe a couple of years I announced that PBS, was one of the parties that but one day bid for a component of NIDS in Jamaica.
I remember that.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that they work with central banks in terms of different particular technological operations. So like, they are a distributor or a maintenance provider of particular complementary IT services that you don't really think about basically, but you still need somebody to actually be there to keep things running. So even the POS system that most of us actually use, they're actually involved in part of that back-end process as well. So not a pretty business, but it's a business.
And a great business as well. They are one of the biggest revenue earners on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, wouldn't you say? Because they're a
Well,
multinational company. It's not just Jamaica. They're in several countries.
they're in more than 20 countries, Kalila. Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Cayman Islands, Leave Domrep as well. Just think, and eventually they're going to be in Peru and Ecuador as well. So just entire gamut or spectrum of Latin America, Caribbean, and now parts of South America. And
Yeah.
I pointed out earlier, largest US distributor in the entire Western Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And necessarily country region, entire Western Hemisphere, to give it that kind of scale or quantum as to how big their business actually is.
Exactly. So that's what I was saying. They're a massive company, especially in terms of the Jamaican scale, because they don't do stuff that is typically top of mind. It's a lot of the back office stuff that you generally don't think about. But who gets it done? PBS, and they're in all of these countries, 20 countries. Ryan says, I love PBS. They lease and service the Manchester Municipal Corporation's printing machines. I love their service. Also provide good network equipment as well. Time to talk Oracle business with PBS.
Yes. So they also work on cybersecurity and your Oracles, your Alphabets, and a couple of those other major Silicon Valley players. They're the ones who work in getting those products down to different companies and businesses here in this part of the world, basically.
Okay. And for those who want more information about PBS, they did a preference share raise last year as well.
2022. 2022.
2022? My thing
Yeah,
here
it
was
was
streamed
it was
1 year
September
ago.
it was September 2022.
Why is YouTube telling me 1 year ago?
Because remember, Kalila, 2 years hasn't passed as yet. 2 years will come around August/September. So that's why YouTube is only showing you 1 year at the
Yeah, it
moment.
would have been 2022. YouTube tricking me. But yes, if you guys want to check out that video, you can check it out. It's called Taking Stock Live PBS Preference Share Offer. And it was all about, we got a lot of info on what they do, behind the scenes of PBS, their growth trajectory, and like the current offer, it's also preference shares. So if you want a better idea, you can check out that interview.
One little piece of context though. So the preferential that are going to be voted on at the EGM on June 6th, which I believe is next week Thursday, these are redeemable preference shares in that they have a general fixed date of life. The reason I'm highlighting this key point is that the 2022 preference share offer, that was a perpetual cumulative redeemable preference share, meaning that it will be redeemed eventually, but it has no specific fixed redemption date per se. So per 15 years, preference share has to exist. And then every 3 years after that, the company can decide to actually redeem it afterwards at that point. So that's why I have to just get key distinction. So the preference share issue back in August 2018, it's maturing now in 2024. Similar for the new preference share that are about to issue as well.
So are they just replacing the old ones with new ones at lower interest rates?
Not necessarily, because remember, preference shares that are maturing come July, those are Jamaican dollar preference shares at 9.75%. The current proposed preference shares are at 8.25% in US dollar terms. So now it's actually cheaper per se, because back then the preference shares were issued at a lower exchange rate vis-a-vis today. So two different dynamics. And the thing is, the funds are likely going to be used for some level of expansion, because I pointed out earlier, they haven't finished acquiring the businesses in Peru and Ecuador as yet. So it does give some indicative signal in the sense that there is potential they might use this fundraise to fund this acquisition or other acquisitions that are in the pipeline that they might have or other business opportunities.
So we have a couple of comments that I want to take before we wrap. So Kish says, love PBS preference shares, consistent income. Ryan said, why didn't PBS just do an APO? I mean, it's preference, what a company prefers to do. They already have a track record for doing successful preference shares. Tavares said, broker them poison people with APO. Before we go, and Javon says, I hope PBS preference is more affordable this time around. Before we go, somebody wanted your opinion, David, on the whole inflation conversation. Let me see if I can find back that comment. Can't find the specific comment, but they were saying, what is your answer to our poll question? Is it time for BOJ to start reducing interest rates? What do you think?
I believe that interest rates should start to level off or see some reduction, but I think the timing is going to be the key thing that is going to be on everybody's mind, because the governor had indicated in a prior article that there's potential for some decrease in interest rates later this year, but at the same time it is still relatively early waters because we're currently in the hurricane season within next month, and also we have to account for the fact that there are just unexpected you have uncertainties right now in the environment that require some level of prudence on top of that. Why do I say uncertainties? We are currently still seeing the geopolitics play out on the other side of the world, and even though we are far from that chaos, it can still have some repercussions for our markets based on the cost of oil and other commodities. So I believe I had an article last week about how the BOJ added Iran as a risk from their perspective following the death of the Iranian president. And geopolitics might seem inconsequential for most people, but the thing is, the BOJ has to weigh this into consideration, because if it is that there is external inflation that's going to come in and create potentially further inflation in the marketplace, that's going to be problematic as well. And there's a tweet on Twitter earlier today, apologies X. This is IB Conte. He mentioned how, he has a part coming up, and he mentioned how Wisynco, craving a rare nephew, increasing their prices. So prices are still going up, just a lower pace. But it would be good to have a reduction in interest rates. But I don't think I would say, hey, we should come down next month, because there are implications for every action that have happened, and with that, the BOJ should proceed with a more structured and deliberate approach, because while we all want low interest rates, we do not want to face the consequences of a reactive central bank. And the reason why I say that is you don't want the BOJ to rapidly drop rates and you have a potential spike in the FX rate at the same time, where you don't necessarily want to have rates coming down and the BOJ caught flat-footed again with high inflation. So rates definitely, I believe rates should come down, but based on a strategy that matches the reality. It shouldn't just be, hey, everybody balling for lower rates. You just don't know the implications of this Russian rate cuts too quickly. And right now, I know that, well, I shouldn't say I should know, but right now, I believe a lot of other countries are also watching the US Federal Reserve's stance in terms of when it does decide to cut rates as well. Because that inflation differential alongside the interest rate differential are going to be two other factors that are going to potentially play into the BOJ and other countries' decisions as well of when to actually cut rates.
All right. Thanks, David. So your answer is B then. Basically, that we shouldn't reduce the interest rates just yet. Hold strain for just a little bit longer. No, they still need to control inflation.
Still need to control inflation and make sure that we have monetary stability. I do not want to live in a fairy tale land or like a Zimbabwe, where you have $1 billion and you're a poor billionaire. That's a perfect way to see it.
Oh my goodness. Don't even mention the Z country. Yeah. Thanks, David. Appreciate your insights as usual.